All right, so should we talk about clinginess? I, 18M, have noticed a pattern in my relationships with women. We would get to know each other, we're texting for hours, we're making jokes, we're just having a lovely conversation. Then the next day we start texting again, but with a little less engagement. And as time goes on, the other person just completely stops responding, even though we had a lot in common. So I tried to flip the script. Instead of sending good morning texts, I would just text when I have something interesting to say. Instead of giving compliments, I would maybe tease in a playful way. Instead of caring about the other person, I literally didn't give a crap what happens to them. And for some reason, that worked. Every time I texted them, they would reply back pretty much straight away, and they would reciprocate the same energy I give. So what's the point of having a relationship if I can't be interested in the other person for them to be interested in me? It's a really common experience, right? So if you're someone who finds yourself, it's a really unfortunate conclusion or trajectory that this person is going through, which is I engage with someone, I get super excited, we have a wonderful time, and then over time, my relationship with them slowly extinguishes. And so what I have to force myself to start doing is like stop caring. It's like stop being like authentic, like I'm going to stop complimenting them. I have to train myself to not care about them. And then what happens when I train myself to not care about this person, I actually get like better responses, right? The response that I get is more of what I want. They respond more to my texts. And so what's happening is this person is sort of like struggling between what they kind of consider like being like an authentic good person, which hurts me and doesn't get me what I want, versus kind of being sort of an asshole and being less kind, which sort of gets me what I want, right? And then this person kind of struggles, and then they're like stuck between one of two places. Do I become clingy or do I become an asshole? And it's really unfortunate when people find themselves in this situation because they like tend to wind up doing one of the two, and both of them are actually toxic, right? We don't want to become clingy, but we also don't want to like, start not caring about the people that we want to form relationships with. Like that's not healthy over time, but it happens all the time. Very, very classic. So what's going on here and what do we do about it? So the key thing to start with, as always, like so at HG, we talk about a principle that I learned in medicine, which is that good diagnosis precedes good treatment. So what we want to do is start by understanding the problem, right? And that's not exclusive to medicine. If I have flooding in my house and a plumber comes over, they have to start by understanding, okay, where's the leak coming from, right? If you go to a mechanic, they have to diagnose the problem before they fix it. So in that same way, within yourself, you have to understand what's going on before you can start to correct that behavior and ultimately like go to a kind of healthy place. So little bits of advice. The first thing that I've noticed about people who get really, really clingy, I wasn't going to do iPad for this, but maybe I should, is that the first thing they should kind of scale back on is like the intensity of the first interaction. So there's a saying that, the brightest flame burns out the quickest, right? And so in any kind of relationship, like I've just noticed this a lot. I mean, I've noticed it kind of clinically. So this is like a well-described experience of people with like borderline personality disorder, where they tend to have very, very intense, like rocket fuel level relationships that then run out of fuel and then collapse. So I'm not saying that everyone in this situation has borderline personality disorder, but it's just something that we've seen a lot, or I've worked with a lot. So how to avoid getting clingy? Let's start there. And then what we need to do is, first of all, recognize that like this person has two options. Either they go the clingy route or they go the uncaring route. And what they find is that this leads to extinguishing interactions. And this leads to increasing interactions. And what this person wants is increased interactions because they're looking for friendship or romantic relationships, right? And so what they sort of end up doing is learning that, maybe I go down this route. So the first thing that we want to understand is like, what's going on inside, right? Like, how do you feel when you're texting for hours the first day you meet someone? That sounds a little bit excessive to me. So it sounds to me like a bright candle that's going to burn out quickly. And this is just something to understand in relationships, right? Is generally speaking, like healthy relationships tend to form slowly. So if you think about the interaction for people, with healthy relationships, it tends to go like this. So this is time, and this is level of interaction. Right? If we look at like the formation of unhealthy relationships, oftentimes it can be like this. Right? This is time, level of interaction. And so sometimes you can absolutely have this kind of relationship, right? Where it's like intense and it just, it builds and it stays high. But I would say that generally speaking, these two curves, this one and this one, are way more common. So the main thing to really understand is, what are you trying to get out of this relationship? Because I think oftentimes what happens is, if you're like complimenting a girl, like, are you like, that's kind of interesting, right? Are you like, what are you doing there? So generally speaking, I don't really compliment people that I have relationships with. I may appreciate them from time to time, but I don't like open up with a bunch of compliments. Because usually like that signals something else. Are you like, so you have to start by figuring out what is going on within you. So when you're texting someone for hours, like, why are you texting them for hours? Are you genuinely enjoying the interaction? Are you hopeful that this will turn into something? Are you just are you just kind of chilling and having a good time? Because if you're chilling and having a good time, then it shouldn't really matter to you that things kind of fizzle out over time, right? Like, it shouldn't matter, because you're just appreciating the moment, and the moment isn't going to last forever. So if I'm like walking down the street and I see a beautiful flower and I smell the flower and I'm like, wow, that flower is amazing, and then I just move on with my life. So if this is truly what you're doing, then it shouldn't bother you that the next day they don't text, right? Because you can just appreciate the interaction and move on. But chances are you're hopeful, or you're attaching some kind of expectation. And this is the key thing to understand. Because when you attach an expectation, oftentimes done subconsciously, like you're kind of lonely, you're kind of interested in this person, you do want to ask them out, and you start complimenting them, and like you're kind of like gearing up to ask them out, you want them to like you, you're kind of like love bombing them a little bit, right? You're trying to stack the deck in your favor. You're creating an expectation. And if you're not transparent with that expectation, if you're not transparent with that intention, what it's probably going to lead to is like some kind of miscommunication over time, because you're saying one, like you're doing one thing, you're intending one thing, but you're kind of saying something else. You're not being kind of explicit over it. And then like the person doesn't understand what's going on in your head, right? Like, because you're not telling them. In fact, what you're sort of doing is like even misleading them in a worst case scenario. And then what happens is they don't respond the way that you want to. So like, this sounds like egregious to me. Sending a good morning text? Dude, I have never sent a good morning text to anyone that I don't have some kind of serious relationship with. Like, even close friends of mine, like, I don't send them good morning texts. Like, the only people that I will send good morning texts to are people that I have intimate relationships with. So this sounds very strange to me. So I don't know if this is the kind of thing where Dr. K is a boomer and like this is normal now, but like, I don't send good morning texts to my friends. Like, I sent like good morning text to my girlfriend. Like, I sent good morning text to my wife. I may imagine at some point that I will send good morning texts to, maybe my parents or brother or like, kids one day. I'm sure I would want a good morning text from my kids when they're old enough to text. But this sounds to me to be like quite intimate. And so this is where I don't know what the standard is. Maybe that's normal now, but like, this could be the kind of thing where like, you have one really, really like intensive, long, lovely conversation, and then you start sending good morning texts, and the person is like, wait, this is a level of intimacy that I'm not comfortable with. Like yesterday, we were talking about how awesome Dune is and how much we love the revival of science fiction and fantasy. And the next morning you're like, Good morning, beautiful. Like that seems kind of like romantic in nature to me. And this is where I'd sort of say, like, be explicit if you have an intention. So what kind of expectation should have? Like, if you're romantically interested, just ask him out. Right? Just do it. Like, if you want to ask someone out, just ask them out. Don't piddle around. And if you're afraid of rejection, which is oftentimes the reason that people don't ask people out, right? Like, you're afraid they're going to say no. So let me compliment them a lot. Let me tell them how awesome I am. Let me convince them that I'm worth going out with. And then I will ask them out. And during that time, you're like doing all these weird things, like you're sending flowers and crap like that. And it's like, why is this person saying, oh, you're so sweet? But you're not asking them out. So then you kind of get friend zoned because you're not like making your intentions clear. And then you ask them out. And then like you've had this expectation. And then that expectation gets dashed. Right? So I think if you want to ask someone out, just ask them out. Next thing is about the clinginess. So what are you getting? Like, what's going on? So this is where I would really think a little bit about when you have this awesome kind of this relationship here, what emotional needs are being met? Because when we think about clinginess, this comes down, in essence, to emotional needs, okay? So when I'm clingy with someone, like they're giving me something. Like why? Like let's even think about the word cling. So, you know, a couple years ago when we first put our kids into like daycare or whatever, like they cling to us, right? Children will like cling to their parents when they feel like unable to be on their own. They don't feel safe. You know, you cling to, like, even if you think about stray cats. Like if you feed a cat and they start following you around, they're kind of clinging to you, right? You're meeting some kind of emotional need. Now, what tends to happen, the reason we get into clingy relationships is because people inadvertently meet a high, intense emotional need of ours. So this is where like you're texting this person, it's like, wow, like this is amazing. This is what I've been craving this entire time. And so for you, like let's look at the interaction, okay? So let's talk about intensity of interaction. And then here's you, right? So the intensity of interaction is really high. And then for them, like it may be like here. And then in this mismatch is like when you start to get clingy, because then when the next day rolls around, right, like you're texting at this level, good morning, compliments, because you're trying to get them to do what they did yesterday. You want that again. You're like, oh my God, that felt so good. I felt so heard. I connected so much. I didn't feel alone. Like that was awesome. Give it to me again. And so you open out strong out of the gate. But then they kind of respond with this. And then what happens over time is that the more of a mismatch there is, the more the communication is going to decrease. Okay? Because if there's like a mismatch in communication, it's kind of think about, you know, like friends that you play games with online. Like y'all are kind of both on the same page. They're like some people that are like messaging you every day, hey, you want to play Dota? Hey, you want to play Dota? Hey, you want to play Dota? And if you don't play Dota that often, like that mismatch is going to lead them to start asking other people and you to like not respond to them every day. And over time, like the people that you end up interacting with are the people that are sort of like on your level. And so why is this person getting more response when he stops caring? Because stopping to care is the way, so this is where his emotional needs are. This is where the person he's engaging with are. And when he stops caring, he's like artificially and arguably toxically reducing his emotional need, right? So when I like numb myself by 50%, then we're kind of on the same page. And then like our communication actually increases over time because we're both like in the same place. And so this is the last thing that I'd say. First thing is to understand your emotional needs. And then the next thing is to like recognize like, okay, what are this person's emotional needs? Because if we look at this, what's absent from this entirely is any understanding of the other person's experience. right? It's just about what I think, what I need, what I'm expecting. There's a complete lack of understanding of, okay, what does this person want from the relationship? What is this person's experience of the relationship? I'm not saying this to be harmful or try to, I recognize that makes it sound like this person is uncaring. This person's 18. Like, we don't get taught this stuff. Like, that's the problem, right? No one sits us down and says, by the way, this is how you form a healthy relationship. It's just like RNG, depending on what our parents are, what your home life is like, whether people teach you this stuff intrinsically or not. I don't blame this person. I think, in fact, it's awesome that this person posted this because this problem is so common, but no one ever explains this to us. And so what we end up doing is discovering artificial toxic ways of not caring about people that actually match their level of engagement, right? And then we start to see better responses. And then what happens over time is what this person is thinking is the right way to engage with people is to start being unfeeling and uncaring towards them. And if we do that, we're going to become toxic over time, and that'll ruin our relationships. But that's going to be the only way that we learned how to fix it because no one sort of, taught us what the right level of interaction is. So think a little bit about, what is the other person's experience? What are they looking for? You can even ask them. You can have a, DTR, define the relationship conversation with friends. I actually have those conversations with people that I play games with. I'll ask questions occasionally. I'll be like, hey, how often do you want to, are you interested in playing Dota or not interested? A very good friend of mine. We've been tight, dude. We were roommates way back and we're awesome friends. And I really love playing Dota. We'll sometimes play some games together, but they don't seem to be interested in Dota. They like watching Dota. So we'll have a conversation about it. And I'll be like, hey, I messaged you a couple times about Dota. You seem like you're not interested. Is this the kind of thing you want me to message you or not message you or what? And he's like, oh yeah, it's got a steep learning curve, so I'm not interested in investing that much time. But I love watching it and I love it I'm down to watch anytime. I just don't want to play. And it's cool, now I understand. So you can kind of define the relationship. You can, even with people that you kind of meet, relatively soon, you can sort of check in with them periodically. You can sort of read between the lines some. Because it sounds kind of aggressive to me to sort of ask someone, hey, do you want me to text you every day the day after you meet them? Do you want me to text you good morning every single day after we've met once? This is the kind of thing where you had a really great conversation. I think it's fine to acknowledge it the next day. Hey, I really enjoyed talking to you yesterday. You want to hang out sometime. If that's what you want, right? Understand your emotional needs and make them known. And then give other people the opportunity to meet you where you're at or not meet you where you're at. And over time, you may learn some adjustments. Don't ask them that the next day, right? Leave the ball in their court sometimes. Don't always have the ball in your court. So the next day, see if they want to message you. And if they don't message you by 4 p.m., you just shoot them a quick text, say, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation yesterday. It was awesome. Hope you're doing well. And then if they don't respond, this is where you got to learn how often the ball is coming across the court. Because this is what happens with people who are clingy. You become a tennis ball machine. So normally when two human beings are playing tennis, I hit the ball over to your side, right? And then I wait for them to hit it back. And then I hit it back. This is how tennis works. Now, I'm not saying some people will have very, very ironclad rules. If I text them and they don't respond, I'm never texting them again. I don't think that's healthy either because sometimes stuff happens. Maybe the day that you texted them, their father got diagnosed with COVID, right? It's there are all kinds of reasons. So I think it's okay to give them a couple days and text them again and give them a couple days and text them again. And then if they don't respond, you can even have a conversation like this, which is, so I'll give you all an example of so sometimes I'll invite people to things, right? And they won't come and you invite them 3 times and they don't come. Then I think it's appropriate to just ask them a question. Be like, hey, I've invited you a couple times. It seems like you haven't come. I was just curious, do you want me to continue inviting you or not? I understand sometimes people are busy. Sometimes people are just not that interested. Just help me understand. Do you want me to invite you in the future? Yes or no? That I don't think is aggressive. And if they don't respond to that, then you're done. Sometimes what happens with clingy people is it's a machine gun. It's a tennis ball machine. You're just sending text after text after text after text after text. Feels overwhelming. The person feels attacked and then they shut down, right? They put up barriers and then they end up blocking you if you're not careful. So to summarize, this kind of situation is very, very common. We'll oftentimes meet people and we'll hit it off. And we enjoy that interaction so much that like we start to get hungry for it. We attach certain expectations, certain hopes. Oh my God, this conversation was amazing. I want to have another one. I want to have another one. I want to have another one, which makes perfect sense, right? If you eat some really delicious food, you wake up the next day, you're like, man, let's go round two. Like, let's go. Like when you start playing a video game, right? And you really enjoy it, you binge that game for 8 hours. You don't wake up the next day and not think about it at all. You're like, let's go. Let's play again. It's completely normal to have that reaction. And at the same time, this is a relationship where someone else may have a slightly different perspective. You don't really know. So you've got to be careful. You've got to think a little bit about their perspective. So if you find yourself getting clingy and they kind of shut you down because you're kind of over communicating, what can also happen is you can learn in kind of like a hurtful way to stop caring about the other person. And when you stop caring about the other person, what can happen is this scenario here, where you artificially reduce your level of communication to a level they're comfortable with. And you actually observe, rightly so, this is like kind of an observation, that they respond better to that. You're not actually being an ass to them, right? You're just like making yourself care less so that you bombard them less. And they're actually comfortable with that. So then they respond more. And if you're not careful, what that'll end up as is you becoming kind of like toxic over time with the way that you think about other people and the way that you treat other people. Because it does actually give you the kind of response that you want. And so what should you do about this? Start by understanding yourself, right? What needs of mine are being met? Like, what am I getting out of this? Why am I doing this? Why do I like this so much? And generally speaking, what you also want to do is think about the other person. Like, where are they in this relationship? Are they as into me as I'm into them? Like, give them some space, give them some time, give them some, time to kind of let you know what their needs are. If they are just as into you as you are into them, they'll probably text you back. Over time, generally speaking, I think it's important to scale up your interactions slowly with other human beings. That's how relationships form, right? It's like, if you meet someone and you move in with them because y'all are deeply in love a week later, those relationships, in my general understanding, are less likely to succeed. The ones that succeed are the ones that you're dating for a year or two before you move in, right? There's like a natural progression. So acknowledge that and sort of take things a little bit slower. And as you understand what needs of yours are being met, that'll be easier. And the last thing that you can do is also just have a defining the relationship conversation, like when it's appropriate. Like, a lot of people aren't going to be ready for that conversation 24 hours after meeting you. Like, what is this? Like, the person's like, I don't know. I just met you yesterday. I have no idea what this is. But at some point, it may be useful to have a little bit of a conversation like that. Like, hey, I've invited you a couple times. It seems like you've been busy. I'm just curious. Do you want me to continue inviting you? Simple, yes or no. You don't have to provide justification. You don't have to provide reasoning. You don't have to explain your thinking. Just send a simple thing their way. Be a little bit patient. Be a little bit forgiving. Don't over-explain. Don't share all your anxieties with them, right? Ha, I have anxiety. Ha, I'm afraid you're abandoning me. And it's like, then the person's gonna be like, this is too much for me to handle. Just ask them, hey, what do you want? Simple. Give them space. And hopefully, as you start to understand what your needs are, as you start to be a little bit more empathic towards them, your relationships will improve.